a dependable caretaker, a small royal child, and a cup of heated milk that should never have been served. What began as a palace guard's intuition concluded with legal proceedings that rattled Kensington Palace to its foundation. This is how one individual's awareness preserved Princess Charlotte's well-being and sent someone William relied upon behind bars. Remain watching, because what investigators uncovered was more troubling than anyone anticipated. Sergeant Thomas Wright had covered Princess Charlotte's security assignment for 8 months, sufficient time to learn her habits, sufficient time to detect when circumstances shifted. It was a Tuesday night in late September when he initially observed. Charlotte sat in the household drawing room, her academic materials scattered across the low table. Kate assisted beside her, guiding with assignments. Typical scene, apart from Charlotte's head repeatedly falling forward. Her eyes would shut, then spring open as she compelled herself conscious. "Darling, are you feeling well?" Kate inquired, resting a hand on Charlotte's temple. "Simply exhausted, Mummy," Charlotte murmured. Her speech emerged somewhat unclear. "I'm uncertain why." Kate checked her timepiece. 6:15 in the evening. Charlotte never rested, never displayed weariness this premature. The princess was recognized among personnel for her limitless vitality, the youngster who could surpass her brothers in the palace grounds. Wright remained by the entrance, completely motionless, but his awareness registered particulars. Charlotte had been accompanying her caretaker, Eleanor Hayes, for the previous 2 hours. Regular after-school schedule, reading period, modest refreshment, preparation for supper. Nothing abnormal on record except this sleepiness, this unnatural depletion in a youngster who'd been completely spirited at school collection just hours before. Before we proceed further, press that subscribe option. Inform us in the remarks what nation you're viewing from. Now, here's how the security officer first understood something was severely incorrect. Kate guided Charlotte upstairs to recover. Wright stayed at his station, but something troubled him, a sensation he couldn't identify yet. Years of armed forces experience had instructed him to rely on those sensations. 3 days afterward, it occurred once more. Charlotte sat in the reading room, her preferred storybook open in her grasp. Eleanor Hayes was accompanying her, reciting aloud in that rehearsed, calming tone that had made her so appreciated among palace personnel. The caretaker had served for the royal household for 4 years. Flawless recommendations, never a solitary grievance. Wright passed by during his patrol. Through the entrance, he observed Charlotte's head inclined sideways. Her eyes were shut. Eleanor continued reciting, her tone consistent, but her attention moved to the guard for a brief instant, then returned to the book. "Princess Charlotte requires her recovery," Eleanor stated agreeably. "She's experienced such a demanding week." It was Thursday. The week was scarcely midway complete. Wright acknowledged and proceeded his patrol, but he registered a notation in his awareness. Tuesday night, drowsy. Thursday midday, sleeping both occasions, soon after being with Eleanor Hayes. Coincidence, presumably. Youngsters grew weary. Education was challenging. Charlotte had equestrian instruction, piano training, official engagements. Perhaps she required additional rest. But Wright had been instructed to observe sequences, and sequences were beginning to surface. The subsequent Monday, Charlotte participated in a palace gathering with her guardians, a junior occasion designed to help her develop accustomed with royal obligations. 30 minutes of acknowledging visitors, exchanging greetings, presenting for thoroughly managed pictures. Charlotte executed admirably for the initial 20 minutes, composed, beaming, every bit the young princess she was being cultivated to become. Then circumstances transformed. Her expression became strained. Her eyelids sagged. She wavered somewhat, steadying herself on William's limb. "I believe Charlotte's had sufficient," William stated discreetly to an assistant. "Let's conclude this." Eleanor Hayes materialized immediately, as if she'd been anticipating. "I'll escort her upstairs, Your Highness. She's simply overpowered. I understand precisely what she requires." William paused. Wright observed it in the prince's expression. That flash of worry, but Eleanor had been Charlotte's caretaker for years. Reliable, trustworthy. "All right," William concurred. but contact if she's not sensing improved shortly. Eleanor directed Charlotte toward the stairway, one hand securely on the princess's shoulder. Charlotte leaned against her, eyes partially shut. Wright accompanied at a professional separation, regular procedure when any royal youngster departed a public area. He observed Eleanor transport Charlotte to the nursery section, observed the entrance shut behind them. 20 minutes afterward, Eleanor surfaced alone. She proceeded with assurance, thoroughly collected, observed Wright positioned in the passageway. "She's resting peacefully," Eleanor stated. "Just required her customary bedtime schedule somewhat premature today." "Her customary schedule?" Wright inquired. Informal question, professional manner. "Heated milk, peaceful period, her preferred covering." Eleanor responded seamlessly. "Functions every occasion." She proceeded past him, footwear tapping on the refined flooring. Wright stayed in position, processing through what he just heard. Heated milk every occasion. He reflected back through the previous 2 weeks. The sleepiness consistently came in the night, consistently after Eleanor's supervision, consistently following the identical sequence. 3 weeks. That's how extended it required before Wright was confident something was incorrect. He began recording. Not formally, not yet, just individual notations. Occasions, dates, Charlotte's state before and after period with Eleanor. He couldn't retrieve medical documentation, couldn't pose direct inquiries without raising concerns, but he could observe. Tuesday night, Charlotte arrived residence from education full of vitality, conversing to her security officer about a science assignment, laughing with George, thoroughly typical. 90 minutes afterward, after period in the nursery with Eleanor, Charlotte could scarcely maintain her eyes accessible during supper. Thursday midday, identical sequence. Charlotte spirited and involved during midday meal, drowsy and reserved by night refreshment. Saturday morning, Charlotte went horseback riding with Kate, attentive, concentrated, proficient on her mount. 3 hours afterward, after Eleanor brought her midday beverage, Charlotte drifted off in the middle of a discussion with her grandmother. Wright understood what his instruction manual would specify. Document concerns through appropriate channels. Record and elevate. Don't examine autonomously. But something prevented him from submitting and formal documentation. Eleanor Hayes had influential supporters on personnel. 4 years of excellent performance. Recommendations from aristocratic households across England. If Wright was incorrect, if this was nothing beyond a youngster's natural weariness, his profession would suffer. He required to be confident. The chance came on a Sunday night. Wright was designated to overnight protection in the household section. Charlotte had participated in religious services that morning, entertained in the grounds that midday. By all measures, she should have been naturally exhausted, but Eleanor maintained on her night schedule anyway. Wright situated himself near the nursery passageway, not evidently observing, just available. He perceived Eleanor's tone through the somewhat open entrance, gentle and calming. "Here we are, sweetheart. Your special milk assists you rest so effectively. It tastes peculiar tonight," Charlotte's young tone responded, somewhat harsh. "That's just the sweetener, darling. Consume it all. You'll sense improved." A silence, then Charlotte's tone softer. "I'm already drowsy. Can I omit it tonight? Now, you understand the schedule. Every night. That's what makes it function." Wright's hand shifted unconsciously toward his communication device, but he halted himself. He possessed nothing concrete, just awareness, just a youngster stating milk tasted harsh. 15 minutes afterward, Eleanor surfaced from the nursery. She transported a vacant glass on a small platform, observed Wright in the passageway. "All arranged for the night," she stated agreeably. "Somewhat premature, isn't it?" Wright remarked. The sun scarcely descended. Eleanor's expression tightened just somewhat. Princess Charlotte maintains a very structured timetable. Schedule is significant for youngsters. She proceeded past him. Wright observed her depart, then looked back toward the nursery entrance. That glass vacant. Whatever had been in it, Charlotte had ingested. He didn't understand it yet, but examining that subsequent glass would reveal a sequence that had been occurring for weeks. And Charlotte wasn't the sole youngster at risk. Wright reached a determination. Tomorrow he would communicate to Captain Richard Wells, director of palace protection. He'd offer his observations, permit someone with additional authority determine if this merited examination, but tomorrow was excessively distant. That night around 11, Wright perceived weeping from the nursery section, not audible, subdued, the variety of sound a youngster makes when attempting not to trouble anyone. He shifted rapidly but silently to Charlotte's entrance, tapped it delicately. "Princess Charlotte, are you well?" The weeping ceased. Quietness. Then so gently he almost overlooked it. "I don't sense good." Wright accessed the entrance. Charlotte sat upright in bed, her expression wan in the nightlight's illumination. She appeared much younger than her years, small, alarmed. "My stomach aches," she whispered, "and my head senses peculiar, like everything's distant." Wright advanced inside, sustaining appropriate separation. "Should I contact your guardians?" Charlotte shook her head rapidly. "No, they'll be concerned. Miss Eleanor states I just require to rest it off, that it's typical." "Miss Eleanor has stated this previously?" Wright inquired cautiously. "Sometimes I awaken sensing unusual," Charlotte confessed, "like I'm still dreaming even though my eyes are accessible. She states it's because I don't consume all my milk rapidly enough, that I require to complete it quicker." Every awareness Wright possessed screamed alarm, but he maintained his tone peaceful, professional. "Would you prefer some water? Something to calm your stomach?" "Yes, please." He retrieved water from the adjacent washroom. Charlotte consumed it gradually, her hands shaking somewhat on the glass. "Sergeant Wright," she stated after a moment, "can I inquire something?" "Of course, Your Highness. Is it typical to disregard things? Like, I understand something occurred, but I can't recollect precisely what." Wright's blood ran frigid. "What variety of things?" "Yesterday midday, I recollect Miss Eleanor providing me my milk. Then nothing until supper. But George stated I was entertaining with him in the grounds. I don't recollect any of it. Memory voids, disorientation, physical manifestations, combined with the harsh flavor, the persistence on the schedule, Eleanor's protective conduct. Wright had suspected something was incorrect. Now he understood it was more severe than incorrect. It was unlawful. "Princess Charlotte," he stated delicately, "tomorrow I'm going to communicate to some individuals about this. Significant individuals who can assist. But tonight I require you to commit something." "What?" "If Miss Eleanor presents you milk or anything to consume tomorrow, inform her you're not thirsty. Can you do that?" Charlotte acknowledged gradually. "Am I in difficulty?" "No, sweetheart, you're not in difficulty whatsoever. You're very courageous for informing me this." He remained until she drifted off. Genuine rest, not the sedated unconsciousness he now suspected had been occurring nightly. Then he proceeded directly to Captain Wells's quarters. Some circumstances couldn't wait for morning. Wright tapped firmly on the captain's entrance. It was 11:45 at night. This had better be significant. Wells responded in his dressing garment, annoyance evident on his expression. Then he observed Wright's expression. "Sir, I require to document a potential danger to Princess Charlotte," Wright stated without introduction. Wells' entire disposition transformed. "Come in." Wright presented everything. The sequence of sleepiness, the scheduling, Eleanor's conduct, Charlotte's manifestations, the memory voids, the harsh flavor in the milk. Wells attended without disruption. When Wright concluded, the captain reclined in his seat. "These are severe accusations, Sergeant." "I understand, sir. Eleanor Hayes has an exemplary documentation." "I understand that too, sir." "If you're incorrect." "I'm not incorrect," Wright stated resolutely. "Something is being positioned in that youngster's milk. Something that's sedating her, producing memory deficit, making her physically unwell, and it's occurring regularly." Wells examined him. "You comprehend what you're claiming constitutes unlawful youngster mistreatment?" "Yes, sir. That's precisely what I'm claiming." The captain rose. "Then we manage this by procedure. Tomorrow morning, first matter, we obtain any remaining milk or beverages in the nursery. We contact Dr. Sarah Chen to assess Charlotte. We record everything, and we do not, I repeat, do not notify Eleanor Hayes until we possess concrete proof." "Comprehended, sir." "Good performance, Sergeant." Dismissed. Wright departed, adrenaline still coursing through his constitution. He'd traversed a boundary tonight, accused a reliable personnel member of drugging a princess. His profession balanced on whether the proof confirmed him correct. But when he thought of Charlotte's wan expression, her bewilderment, her shaking hands, he understood he'd reached the sole choice feasible. Tomorrow would bring responses. He just hoped they came in sufficient time. The security officer had no awareness that container would contain proof of an offense that would disturb the entire royal household. Monday morning arrived with autumn precipitation against the palace windows. Wright had scarcely rested. He arrived for his assignment at 2 hours premature. Captain Wells was already in his workspace. Dr. Chen arrives at 8, Wells stated. I've arranged for Charlotte to have a standard examination. Nothing that will concern her or the household. We'll assess her then. And the milk? Kitchen personnel have been directed to register every beverage transmitted to the nursery today. Eleanor won't be informed. Everything proceeds through regular channels, but we'll be observing. Wright acknowledged. Professional, regulated. But his awareness raced through possibilities. What if Eleanor detected something was incorrect? What if she modified her sequence today of all days? What if he'd delayed excessively extended, and Charlotte was already harmed beyond restoration? At 7:30, Charlotte came downstairs for breakfast. Wright observed from his station in the passageway. She appeared brighter this morning, more attentive. She laughed at something George stated, acquired a portion of his bread. Because she hadn't received her night milk last night, the consideration sat substantial in Wright's chest. Eleanor Hayes arrived at 8:15, accurately on timetable. She wore her customary uniform, transported her customary container, smiled at the personnel she passed. Everything completely typical, except Wright observed how her eyes examined the passageways, how she halted when she observed Captain Wells communicating with another officer, how her hand gripped her container just a portion tighter. Did she suspect, or was Wright perceiving danger where none existed? "Good morning, Sergeant," Eleanor stated agreeably as she passed him. "Lovely climate we're experiencing." It was pouring precipitation. Dr. Sarah Chen arrived through the confidential entrance at 8:20. Royal physician, relied upon thoroughly by the household. Wells had briefed her individually, demonstrated her Wright's recording. Charlotte is anticipating a standard examination. Wells informed Wright. "We've informed her it's for education documentation. Dr. Chen will execute a complete assessment and acquire blood specimens. Regular procedure won't raise concerns." "How extended for outcomes?" Wright inquired. "Toxicology, 48 hours minimum, potentially 72. Excessively extended, Wright's jaw tightened. Anything could occur in 3 days. But Wells positioned a hand on his shoulder. "I understand, but we do this correctly or we do it incorrectly. Correct means it sustains in legal proceedings." Legal proceedings. The term suspended in the atmosphere. This wasn't just about removing a personnel member. This was about prosecution. Confinement. Charlotte's assessment occurred in the Palace Medical Suite. Kate accompanied her, conversing informally about Charlotte's approaching piano performance. Nothing to recommend worry, nothing to activate alarm. Wright remained outside, attending to subdued tones through the entrance. Dr. Chen's peaceful inquiries, Charlotte's cheerful responses. The princess had no awareness this assessment might preserve her existence. 30 minutes afterward, Dr. Chen surfaced. Her expression was thoroughly neutral, but Wright observed the tightness around her eyes. "Captain Wells, a statement, please," she stated discreetly. They shifted to Wells's workspace. Wright was requested minutes afterward. Dr. Chen sat with a folder accessible in front of her. "I've acquired blood specimens for complete toxicology examination, but I can inform you now, based on physical assessment, that youngster demonstrates indications consistent with regular sedative utilization." Wright sensed something frigid settle in his stomach. What indications? Pupils somewhat expanded even in brilliant illumination. Mild tremor in her hands when she's attempting to concentrate. She mentioned frequent headaches, stomach discomfort, and episodes of bewilderment. She's also significantly underweight for her height and age. When I inquired about rest, she informed me she rests extensively but consistently awakens sensing exhausted. Could these manifestations have other origins? Wells inquired. Absolutely. That's why we require toxicology verification. But combined with Sergeant Wright's observations, Dr. Chen shut the folder. I've treated sufficient cases to recognize the sequence. Someone is providing that youngster sedatives regularly and has been for some duration. The chamber fell quiet. How extended? Wright finally inquired. Based on the manifestation severity, weeks at minimum, potentially months. Months. Charlotte had been suffering for months and no one had observed. No one except Wright, who'd only commenced paying consideration 3 weeks ago. Can you specify what medication? Wells inquired. Not without laboratory verification, but based on her described manifestations, the memory voids, the harsh flavor, the prolonged sleepiness. My educated speculation would be a benzodiazepine or similar sedative hypnotic. Something designed to produce rest and produce amnesia. Prescription medication, Wells stated. Yes, controlled substance. Not something you can acquire over the counter. Which meant Eleanor had either obtained it unlawfully or had retrieval to someone's prescription. Either approach, unlawful. Wright's hands tightened into grips. What do we do now? We delay for toxicology, Wells stated, and we observe every instant. If Eleanor attempts to provide Charlotte anything, we intervene. No, Dr. Chen disrupted immediately. I don't concern about proof or procedure. That youngster's safety comes first. Wells acknowledged, concurred. Right, you're on Charlotte's assignment exclusively until this is resolved. You don't depart her vicinity when Eleanor Hayes is available. Comprehended? Yes, sir. Good, now we delay. But Eleanor didn't delay. That midday, Charlotte had art instruction in the nursery. Eleanor supervised as she consistently did. Wright remained outside the entrance, situated so he could observe through the somewhat accessible entrance. Charlotte painted with concentrated focus. Watercolors, her preferred. A ground scene. Flowers in brilliant primary colors. Beautiful performance, darling, Eleanor stated warmly. You're so talented. Thank you, Miss Eleanor. You must be getting thirsty. All this focus. Let me acquire you something to consume. Wright tensed. He observed Eleanor shift to the small kitchenette attached to the nursery, perceived the sound of a glass being occupied, perceived something else too. A faint rattling. Pills in a container. He shifted to the entrance. Everything well? Eleanor turned, a glass of milk in her hand. Her expression was flawless, professional. Just fine, Sergeant. Charlotte requires her midday beverage. I'll transport it to her, Wright stated, advancing inside. Eleanor's expression didn't waver, but something flickered in her eyes. That's not necessary. I'm completely capable. Police protection procedure, Wright stated resolutely. All nourishment and beverages for principals must be managed according to recent guidelines. Complete invention. No such procedure existed. Eleanor understood it. Wright observed the calculation in her expression. She could challenge him, maintain on her authority over the nursery, or she could comply and avoid attracting consideration. She handed him the glass. Of course. Procedure. Her fingers departed slight moisture on the glass. Her hand had been shaking. Wright transported the milk to Charlotte. Your beverage, Your Highness. Charlotte looked up from her painting. Oh, thank you. She extended for it automatically. Actually, Wright stated informally, Doctor, Chen mentioned you should avoid dairy for a few days. Something about your assessment this morning. Better safe than sorry. Charlotte's hand ceased. Oh, all right. I'll acquire you water instead. Wright presented. That would be lovely. He returned to the kitchenette. Eleanor remained precisely where he'd departed her, observing. Wright positioned the milk glass on the counter, utilized his constitution to protect it from her perspective, and thoroughly slipped it into a proof container he'd concealed in his jacket. The sequence of custody wouldn't be flawless, but it was superior than nothing. He returned with water. Charlotte consumed it happily, thoroughly unaware of what had just occurred. Eleanor observed the entire exchange, stated nothing. But when she thought Wright wasn't looking, her hand shifted to her pendant, contacted it repeatedly, a nervous gesture she couldn't quite regulate. That night, Wright delivered the glass to Captain Wells. "Good performance," Wells stated. "I'll have it transported to the laboratory immediately. Expedited examination. How extended? 24 hours. They comprehend the sensitivity." What Charlotte stated subsequent verified every suspicion he'd possessed. The subsequent morning, Tuesday, Charlotte was unusually reserved at breakfast. She pushed nourishment around her platform, scarcely eating, Kate observed. "Sweetheart, you require to eat." "I'm not very famished, Mummy. Are you sensing unwell?" Charlotte paused, then so discreetly Wright almost overlooked it. "I sense improved, actually. I haven't sensed this conscious in ages." Kate's expression transformed. Worry deepened into something else. Suspicion. "Charlotte," Kate stated cautiously. "Have you been sensing unwell for a duration?" The princess acknowledged. "I thought it was typical." Miss Eleanor stated, "Growing youngsters get exhausted readily, that I just required additional recovery." "And the recovery assisted?" "I don't understand. I rest so extensively, but I'm still exhausted. Except these previous 2 days, I haven't been as drowsy. It's unusual." Kate's eyes discovered Wright across the chamber. He observed the precise instant comprehension clicked into position. 2 days. Charlotte hadn't received her night milk for 2 days, and suddenly she sensed improved. Kate excused herself from breakfast. Wright accompanied at a discreet separation. She proceeded directly to William's study. Wright couldn't perceive the discussion, but he observed through the somewhat accessible entrance. Kate's spirited gestures. William's expression darkening, the telephone contact he made immediately after. 15 minutes afterward, Wright was requested to the study. William remained by the window, his back rigid. Kate sat on the sofa, her hands clasped tightly together. "Sergeant Wright," William stated without turning. "Captain Wells has briefed us on your worries regarding Eleanor Hayes." "Yes, Your Highness. My spouse has just informed me that Charlotte has been experiencing abnormal weariness and illness for some duration. Manifestations that have suddenly improved over the previous 48 hours. "Yes, Your Highness." William finally turned. His expression was regulated, but fury blazed in his eyes. "If someone has been harming my daughter, if someone I relied upon has been drugging her, I desire them detained immediately. Do you comprehend? We're delaying on toxicology verification, sir. Should arrive today. The absolute instant you possess proof, I desire Metropolitan Police involved. Complete examination, unlawful proceedings. I don't concern about discretion or palace reputation. My daughter's safety is all that matters." "Comprehended, sir." Kate communicated for the initial occasion. "Where is Eleanor now?" "With Princess Charlotte, ma'am. Sergeant Wright has been sustaining constant surveillance." "I desire her away from Charlotte," Kate stated resolutely. "Now, if we remove her excessively soon, she'll understand we suspect something," William stated, though the statements clearly pained him. "She might destroy proof. We require to apprehend her in the act or possess irrefutable proof." Kate's jaw tightened. "So we depart our daughter with someone who's poisoning her?" "We depart Charlotte with a security officer who won't permit her out of his perception for even a second," William corrected. He looked at Wright. "Correct, Sergeant?" "Absolutely correct, sir." The toxicology outcomes arrived at 4:30 that midday. Captain Wells contacted Wright to his workspace immediately. Dr. Chen was already there along with Detective Inspector David Pierce from the Metropolitan Police. Wells slid a record across the desk. Wright examined the medical terminology, the chemical designations, the measured quantities. "What am I looking at?" he inquired. Dr. Chen responded, "Lorazepam, a benzodiazepine sedative, discovered in both the blood specimen from Princess Charlotte and in the milk specimen you obtained. The quantities in Charlotte's constitution indicate regular sustained utilization over an extended duration, weeks, potentially months." "And the dosage?" Pierce inquired. "High, sufficient to produce significant sedation in a youngster. Not immediately life-threatening, but prolonged utilization can produce serious developmental complications, cognitive impairment, physical reliance." Wright sensed sick. "She's been reliant on it, potentially addicted. We'll require to monitor her cautiously as it departs her constitution. She may experience withdrawal manifestations." What the toxicology documentation revealed was more severe than anyone anticipated. But first, if you're as disturbed as we were, press that like option and inform us in the remarks. Should caretaker background examinations be more rigorous? Now, here's what physicians discovered in that glass of milk. Detective Inspector Pierce leaned forward. "The milk specimen. Can you verify it was contaminated?" "Crushed lorazepam tablets dissolved in whole milk," Dr. Chen verified. "Approximately 2 milligrams. A significant dose for a youngster Charlotte's age." "Sufficient for a detention?" William inquired. He'd entered the chamber silently during the briefing. Pierce acknowledged. "Combined with the medical proof, witness testimony, and documented observation, yes, Your Highness, more than sufficient." "Then detain her," William stated coldly. "Now, we require to obtain additional proof first," Pierce stated cautiously. "Examine her quarters, acquire her medical documentation if she possesses a prescription, interview other personnel. Do whatever you require to do, but I desire her in custody tonight. I desire her away from my youngsters, and I desire her facing unlawful proceedings." Pierce exchanged glances with Wells. "Comprehended, sir. We'll execute the detention within the hour. But I recommend you and the Princess Consort transport Charlotte somewhere confidential. This will be troubling, and she doesn't require to witness it." William's tone was ice. "We'll be in the household quarters. But, Detective Inspector, I desire to be informed the instant she's in custody." "Of course, Your Highness." William departed. The entrance shut with reserved finality. Pierce rose. "Right then. Let's acquire a warrant and bring her in. Sergeant Wright, I'll require your complete statement. Every observation, every interaction, every particular you can recollect." Wright spent the subsequent 40 minutes and detailing everything he'd witnessed. The sequence of Charlotte's sleepiness, Eleanor's protective conduct, the harsh flavor Charlotte mentioned, the memory voids, the glass of milk he'd obtained. At 5:45, the detention team assembled. Metropolitan Police, Palace Protection, legal representation available to guarantee everything was managed correctly. Eleanor Hayes was in the nursery with Charlotte, reciting a narrative. Same schedule she'd followed for years. Thoroughly typical, except for the armed officers delaying in the passageway. Kate materialized, smiled agreeably at Eleanor. "I'll assume control narrative period. William desires to observe you in Captain Wells's workspace." Eleanor's composure slipped for just a second. "Is something incorrect?" "Just standard personnel matters," Kate stated seamlessly. "I'm confident it won't require extended." Eleanor had no selection but to comply. She rose, smoothed her uniform, smiled at Charlotte. "I'll be returned soon, darling." "Okay, Miss Eleanor." Eleanor proceeded into the passageway, observed the officers delaying. Her expression went wan. "Eleanor Hayes," Detective Inspector Pierce stated formally. "I'm detaining you on suspicion of administering a harmful substance to a youngster youngster endangerment, and assault. You do not have to state anything, but it may harm your protection if you do not mention when questioned something which you afterward rely on in legal proceedings. Anything you do state may be provided in proof. Eleanor's professional mask shattered. This is absurd. I haven't performed anything incorrect. You possess the entitlement to legal representation. Pierce proceeded. Do you comprehend these entitlements as I've explained them? I don't require entitlements because I haven't performed anything. Her tone rose, panic breaking through. Someone is making terrible accusations. Ma'am, I require you to accompany us discreetly, Pierce stated. We can do this peacefully, or we can utilize restraints. Your selection. Eleanor looked around wildly, observed Wright positioned nearby. Her eyes secured on him with sudden comprehension. You, she breathed. You did this. You've been observing me, accompanying me. I was protecting Princess Charlotte, Wright stated peacefully. From what? I've supervised for that youngster for years. I've provided her everything she required. Including lorazepam dissolved in her night milk, Pierce disrupted. We possess toxicology proof, witnesses, the contaminated glass. You can cooperate now, or we can add obstruction to the proceedings. The conflict drained out of Eleanor. Her shoulders slumped. I desire a legal representative. You'll possess one. Let's proceed. They guided her away. Wright observed until she disappeared around the corner. 4 years of relied-upon performance. 4 years of retrieval to a royal youngster. And no one had suspected. No one except the security officer who trusted his awareness over procedure. In 72 hours, that caretaker would be formally proceeded against. But the genuine nightmare was only commencing. Eleanor Hayes spent her initial night in police custody, in a holding chamber at the Metropolitan Police Station. She requested her legal representative immediately, stated nothing else. But quietness couldn't protect her from what investigators were already revealing. At 6 the subsequent morning, Detective Inspector Pierce executed an examination warrant on Eleanor's confidential quarters in the personnel section of Kensington Palace. What they discovered made the case airtight. Wright accompanied the examination team. He remained in the entrance of Eleanor's small but comfortable chamber while officers systematically recorded everything. Sir, you'll desire to observe this. One officer contacted from the washroom. Pierce shifted rapidly. Wright accompanied. The medicine cabinet remained accessible. Inside, tucked behind everyday toiletries, sat 3 prescription containers, all in Eleanor's designation, all for lorazepam, prescribed by 3 different physicians over the previous 8 months. Physician shopping, Pierce stated discreetly. Classic sequence. She proceeded to multiple physicians, claimed anxiety or insomnia, acquired prescriptions from each. None of them understood about the others. Is that unlawful? Wright inquired. Fraudulent prescription acquisition, yes. Add it to the register of proceedings. An officer examining the bedroom contacted out. Detective, you require to observe this. They discovered it in Eleanor's nightstand compartment. A journal. Handwritten entries dating back 6 months. Pierce pulled on coverings, accessed it cautiously, recited aloud. March 15th. Charlotte was difficult again today. Weeping, demanding consideration, refusing to settle. The milk functioned flawlessly. She was sleeping within 20 minutes. 2 hours of tranquility. He moved forward. April 2nd. Increased dosage somewhat. Charlotte rested through midday meal. Kate inquired if she was unwell. Informed her the princess was just exhausted from education activities. No suspicions. Another section. May 10th. Charlotte inquiring why she senses unusual after her milk. Require to be more cautious with scheduling. Perhaps dissolve tablets more thoroughly to reduce harsh flavor. Wright sensed his stomach turn. This wasn't impulsive. This wasn't an error. Eleanor had been systematically, deliberately drugging Charlotte for months and recording it. Why would she transcribe this down? Wright inquired. Regulation, Pierce stated. Abusers often record their activities, makes them sense influential, provides them a documentation of their achievement. He shut the journal cautiously. This is premeditated youngster mistreatment, extended sequence. The Crown Prosecution Service will possess everything they require. The examination proceeded. Additional proof surfaced. Receipts for prescription medications from different pharmacies. Internet examination history on Eleanor's laptop, demonstrating inquiries about youngster sedation, benzodiazepine effects, avoiding detection. And most damning, electronic messages to her sibling transmitted 2 months before. I discovered the flawless solution to managing Charlotte. She's so much simpler when she's drowsy. The household thinks I'm a miracle performer because she's so peaceful around me. They possess no awareness. Pierce photographed everything, registered it, obtained it. By midday, the proof occupied 3 storage containers. This is sufficient to position her away for years, Pierce stated. Youngster endangerment, administering a harmful substance. Fraudulent prescriptions, assault of a minor. She's looking at significant confinement duration. Good, Wright stated. William desired to be briefed immediately. Pierce and Wright encountered him in his confidential workspace at 2 that midday. William attended in absolute quietness as Pierce detailed the proof, the prescriptions, the journal, the electronic messages, the sequence of systematic drugging spanning 6 months. When Pierce concluded, William rose, proceeded to the window, remained with his back to them for an extended instant. When he finally communicated, his tone was deadly peaceful. 6 months. Yes, Your Highness. Someone was poisoning my daughter for 6 months and no one observed. Your Highness. William turned. I'm not blaming you, Detective Inspector. I'm blaming myself. Charlotte is my youngster, my responsibility, and I relied upon someone who was harming her every solitary day. Eleanor Hayes was cautiously proficient at deception, Pierce stated. Her recommendations were flawless. Her conduct was professional. She understood precisely how to avoid suspicion until Sergeant Wright observed. Both individuals looked at Wright. Yes, sir, Pierce verified. Sergeant Wright's observations and recording were instrumental in constructing this case. William traversed to Wright, extended his hand. Thank you. You preserved my daughter from God understands how much additional suffering. Wright shook the presented hand. Just performing my occupation, sir. No, you proceeded beyond your occupation. You relied upon your awareness when you possessed no concrete proof. You risked your profession to protect Charlotte. That's not just obligation. That's integrity. Wright sensed something tight in his chest ease somewhat. She's a good youngster, sir. Deserves superior than what she was acquiring. She's acquiring superior now. Dr. Chen states Charlotte's manifestations are already improving. No permanent harm anticipated because you acted when you did. We're approaching the instant when everything came collapsing down for the caretaker. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. We cover royal protection narratives others won't contact. Here's what occurred when William learned the complete truth about what Eleanor had planned subsequent. The examination expanded. Pierce's team interviewed every personnel member who'd functioned with Eleanor. The representation that surfaced was troubling. A housemaid documented that she'd observed Eleanor crushing pills on several occasions. I inquired what she was performing. She stated they were vitamins for Charlotte, simpler to swallow when powdered. I didn't think anything of it. Charlotte's previous instructor mentioned that the princess had become increasingly drowsy during midday instruction. It commenced around March. Charlotte would drift off during reciting. Eleanor maintained it was typical childhood weariness. I accepted that explanation. Even Kate had observed modifications. Charlotte became quieter over the spring, she informed investigators. less energetic. I thought it was just her growing up, becoming more reserved. Eleanor assured me it was a typical developmental phase. Eleanor had been so convincing, so professional, so relied upon. The most chilling revelation came from Eleanor's individual laptop. Examination history from 2 weeks before her detention. How to increase benzodiazepine dosage without detection. Long-term effects of sedatives on youngsters. Can tolerance develop to rest medications? She'd been planning to increase the dosage. Charlotte was developing tolerance meant the current amount was becoming less effective. Eleanor's solution wasn't to cease. It was to provide Charlotte more. Dr. Chen reviewed the examination history with growing alarm. If she'd increased the dosage significantly, we could have been looking at respiratory depression, deficit of consciousness, even coma. Charlotte could have perished. Wright had ceased it just in duration. That discussion would be presented in legal proceedings 6 months afterward. But first, Charlotte required to recover. Dr. Chen monitored Charlotte closely over the subsequent weeks. The princess experienced mild withdrawal manifestations, headaches, anxiety, difficulty resting, but nothing severe. The dosage, while harmful, hadn't been high sufficient to produce physical reliance requiring medical intervention. She's remarkably resilient. Dr. Chen informed William and Kate in a confidential consultation. Physically, she'll make a complete recovery. Emotionally, that may require extended. Charlotte understood something had occurred. She was old sufficient to comprehend that Eleanor was departed, that something had been incorrect. But William and Kate, with Dr. Chen's guidance, determined to protect her from the complete particulars. When she's older, we'll explain, Kate stated. For now, she understands Eleanor made an error with medicine and had to depart. That's sufficient. Charlotte seemed relieved, actually. I'm resting superior now, she informed her mother one night. I don't sense foggy anymore. I'm glad, sweetheart. Mummy, I think I didn't prefer Miss Eleanor as much as I pretended to. Kate pulled her daughter proximate. You don't have to pretend with us ever. If something senses incorrect, you inform us. Commit. Commit. The recent caretaker, cautiously vetted by both Palace Protection and autonomous investigators, commenced 3 weeks after Eleanor's detention. Charlotte was cautious at first, observant, but gradually, under appropriate supervision, the princess bloomed. Her vitality returned. Her laughter came back. The youngster who'd been artificially subdued for 6 months rediscovered herself. Wright observed from his protection station, as Charlotte entertained in the palace grounds, one midday in late October. Genuinely entertained, running, shouting, climbing the old oak tree, despite her recent caretaker's protests. Alive in an approach she hadn't been since March. She appears content, Captain Wells remarked, joining Wright. Yes, sir, she does. You did that. You provided her that back. Wright didn't respond, just observed Charlotte suspend upside down from a branch, her laughter transporting across the lawn. Eleanor Hayes's preliminary hearing occurred in November. She pleaded not guilty to all proceedings. Her protection attorney argued that Eleanor had been attempting to assist Charlotte, that the princess was genuinely struggling with rest complications, that Eleanor's activities were misguided but not malicious. The Crown Prosecution Service offered the proof methodically. The journal entries, the electronic messages, the examination history, the multiple fraudulent prescriptions, the systematic recorded sequence of drugging spanning 6 months. Eleanor's protection collapsed. In December, she modified her plea to guilty on advice of counsel. Sentencing was scheduled for January. William participated in the sentencing hearing. Not common for royals to materialize in legal proceedings, but he maintained. Eleanor Hayes remained before the judge. She appeared smaller somehow, diminished. The professional mask was extended, departed. The judge reviewed the case, communicated about the sacred reliance, positioned in those who supervise for youngsters. The betrayal of that reliance. The harm produced not just to Charlotte, but to the entire institution of royal performance. Eleanor Hayes, the judge stated, "You systematically poisoned a youngster in your supervision for your own convenience. You fraudulently obtained regulated substances. You recorded your offenses with troubling pride. You demonstrated no remorse. Until confronted with irrefutable proof, you endangered the existence of a young princess who relied upon you thoroughly." Eleanor's legal representative rose. "Your Honor, my client has expressed deep regret." "Your client expressed regret only when facing prosecution," the judge disrupted. "Her own transcriptions demonstrate no remorse, only satisfaction at her successful deception." The courtroom was quiet. "On the proceeding of administering a harmful substance to a youngster, I sentence you to 4 years confinement. On the proceeding of youngster endangerment, 3 years to operate consecutively. On proceedings of fraudulent prescription acquisition, 1 year to operate concurrently. Total sentence, 7 years in confinement." Eleanor wavered somewhat. Her legal representative stabilized her. Additionally, the judge proceeded, "You are permanently barred from functioning with youngsters in any capacity. You will be registered as a youngster offender. Upon release, you will face 10 years of supervised probation." The gavel descended. 7 years. Eleanor Hayes, who'd been relied upon with a princess, would spend 7 years in confinement. William demonstrated no expression as officers guided Eleanor away, but Wright, positioned in the rear of the courtroom, observed the prince's hand unclenched somewhat, observed his shoulders decline just a portion. Justice delivered. The final verdict delivered justice that few anticipated. Remain with us for the conclusion. Now, here's what occurred after the sentencing and how William thanked the security officer who preserved his daughter. The day after sentencing, William requested a confidential encounter with Wright. They encountered in William's workspace. No personnel available, no formality, just 2 individuals conversing. "Sit down, Sergeant," William stated. Wright sat, uncomfortable with the informality. William poured 2 glasses of scotch, handed one to Wright. "I'm informed you don't consume on obligation." "No, sir. You're off obligation for this discussion." Wright accepted the glass. William sat across from him. 7 years. It should be additional." "It's what the regulation permits, sir." "The regulation?" William shook his head. "The regulation can't account for what she acquired from Charlotte. 6 months of her childhood. 6 months of bewilderment, alarm, physical illness. 6 months of wondering why she sensed incorrect all the duration." "But Charlotte's recovering, sir," Dr. Chen states. "I understand what Dr. Chen states. Complete physical recovery anticipated. Minimal psychological impact, because we apprehended it in duration." William looked at Wright directly. "We apprehended it because of you. I was just— Don't state you were just performing your occupation." William disrupted. "I've examined your documentation, Sergeant. 12 years of armed forces performance, multiple deployments, transferred to Royal Protection 4 years ago. Exemplary documentation. Not a solitary incident. You understand why, sir? Because you follow procedure flawlessly. You're the model of professional discipline. So when you broke procedure, when you examined autonomously, when you acquired that glass without authorization, when you pushed this despite possessing no formal proof, you risked everything you'd constructed." Wright positioned down his glass. "Your Highness, if I may communicate freely, please." I looked at that little youngster struggling to remain conscious. I perceived her state. She couldn't recollect entire middays. I observed her acquiring sicker while everyone around her made excuses. Procedure didn't matter anymore. The sole matter that mattered was maintaining her secure. William acknowledged gradually. "That's integrity, Sergeant. Understanding when the regulations matter less than performing what's correct." He halted. I'm promoting you to Staff Sergeant effective immediately, and I'm individually requesting you remain on Charlotte's protection assignment. Sir, that's not necessary. It's not a reward. It's a request. Charlotte relies upon you. She senses secure with you. After everything she's been through, her sensing secure matters additional than procedure or rotation timetables. Wright sensed something transform in his chest. I'd be honored, sir. Good! William rose, extended his hand. Thank you, Staff Sergeant Wright. My household owes you a debt we can never completely repay. Wright rose, shook the presented hand. Seeing her content again, sir. That's payment sufficient. After Wright departed, William remained alone in his workspace. He thought about reliance, about how readily it could be betrayed, about how one individual's awareness and courage had preserved his daughter from ongoing harm. He picked up the telephone, contacted Kate. It's concluded, he stated. Wright's been promoted. He's remaining on Charlotte's assignment. Good, Kate replied. She inquired about him yesterday, desired to understand if he'd still be her security officer. What did you inform her? That the superior security officers are the ones who actually concern, and that Sergeant Wright evidently concerns. Staff Sergeant Wright now. Kate smiled on the other conclusion of the communication. Even superior. Charlotte never understood the complete extent of what Eleanor had performed. She understood Eleanor had made an error with medicine and had to depart. She understood she'd been unwell, but was improved now. She understood that some individuals weren't who they appeared to be, but that the good individuals would consistently protect her. That was sufficient for now. Years afterward, when she was older, William and Kate would inform her the thorough truth. They'd demonstrate her how Wright had observed sequences others overlooked, how he'd relied upon his awareness despite possessing no proof, how he'd risked his profession to maintain her secure. But today, Charlotte was a youngster who could entertain without artificial depletion, who could recollect her middays, who could rely upon the individuals around her, because the one who'd betrayed that reliance was departed. Wright returned to obligation. Same passageways, same station, same professional separation. But something had modified. Personnel acknowledged to him with recent respect. Senior officers sought his opinion. The security officer who'd preserved a princess. He didn't desire the consideration, preferred the reserved professionalism he'd consistently sustained. But he accepted the promotion, accepted the thanks, accepted the responsibility of proceeding to protect Charlotte. Because at the conclusion of the day, that's what mattered. Not recognition, not profession advancement. Just understanding that a youngster who'd been suffering was secure now. 3 months after Eleanor's sentencing, Charlotte approached Wright during her midday interval from instruction. Staff Sergeant Wright, she stated politely. Yes, Your Highness. I made you something. She held out a drawing, watercolor, her preferred medium. It demonstrated a figure in a security officer's uniform positioned beside a smaller figure in a dress. Both were beaming. That's beautiful, Your Highness. It's you and me, Charlotte explained. You protecting me like you consistently do. Wright sensed an unfamiliar tightness in his throat. I'm honored, Your Highness. Charlotte smiled. You can contact me, Charlotte, when it's just us. Everyone else does. I'm afraid that wouldn't be appropriate procedure, Your Highness. Oh. She appeared disappointed, then brightened. Can you at minimum retain the drawing? I'd prefer that very much. Charlotte ran off to her subsequent instruction. Vitality and existence in every movement. Wright looked down at the drawing. Simple, childish, beautiful. He retained it in his workspace, still possesses it today. A reminder that procedure matters, but individuals matter additional. The broader modifications came discreetly. Palace administration implemented recent background examination procedures for all personnel functioning with royal youngsters. Medical monitoring increased. Protection procedures were updated to include behavioral observation instruction. Captain Wells summarized it in a personnel encounter. Eleanor Hayes was one individual, one abuser who slipped through. We've learned from this. We've adapted. We'll be observing additional cautiously. But Wells understood, and Wright understood, and everyone who'd been involved understood. No constitution would ever be flawless. No procedure could guarantee safety. It came down to individuals. Security officers like Wright, who paid consideration, who relied upon awareness, who concerned sufficient to risk comfort for truth. The information media never acquired the complete narrative. Palace officials released a brief statement. A former personnel member has been dismissed and is facing unlawful proceedings unrelated to formal obligations. The royal household has no further remark. That was all the public understood. Eleanor Hayes became a footnote, a minor scandal that scarcely registered in the constant stream of royal information. Charlotte's designation was never mentioned. Her suffering remained confidential, protected, as it should be. But within palace walls, everyone understood, everyone comprehended. A youngster had been harmed by someone relied upon, and a security officer had preserved her. William made one additional confidential gesture. He arranged for Wright to receive a Royal Victorian Order medal. Not publicly announced, no ceremony. Just a confidential presentation in William's workspace. For exceptional performance to the royal household, William stated as he pinned the medal, "Wear it understanding, you earned it in the most significant approach feasible." Wright accepted with reserved dignity. The medal proceeded into a compartment at residence. He didn't wear it, didn't display it, didn't require to. He understood what he'd performed. Charlotte understood. William understood. That was sufficient. Existence returned to typical rhythms. Charlotte thrived under appropriate supervision. George and Louis remained blissfully unaware of how proximate their sibling had come to serious harm. Kate and William shifted forward with enhanced vigilance, but attempted not to permit alarm dominate their parenting. And Wright proceeded his obligation, observing, protecting, relying upon his awareness, because that's what separated good security officers from superior ones. Good security officers followed procedure. Superior security officers understood when procedure wasn't sufficient. Eleanor Hayes performed her sentence in HMP Bronzefield, a female's confinement in Surrey. She was denied parole twice. Other inmates learned what she'd performed. Prisoners possess their own hierarchy, and youngster abusers rank at the foundation. She was released in late 2032 after performing her complete 7 years, immediately positioned on probation, barred from functioning with youngsters, required to register as an offender. Her professional existence destroyed, her reputation permanently tarnished. Some might state 7 years wasn't sufficient for 6 months of systematic poisoning. Others might argue she paid her debt to society. Wright possessed no opinion on the matter. His occupation wasn't punishment, it was protection. And Charlotte was protected. That's all that mattered. On Charlotte's subsequent birthday, Wright remained at his customary station during the small household celebration, observed her extinguish candles, surrounded by individuals who genuinely concerned for her safety and contentment. She apprehended his eye across the chamber, smiled, provided a small wave. He acknowledged back, professional, appropriate, but with genuine warmth. This was why he joined Royal Protection. Not for prestige or proximity to influence, for instance like this. Youngsters secure, households intact, dangers neutralized. One individual's awareness had modified everything, had preserved a princess from ongoing harm, had transmitted a predator to confinement, had reminded everyone that obligation means additional than following instructions. It means performing what's correct, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Genuine obligation isn't about following instructions blindly. It's about understanding when regulations matter less than performing what's correct. It's about relying upon your awareness when everyone else observes nothing incorrect. It's about positioning between a youngster and harm, regardless of who the danger is or how relied upon they materialize. Sometimes the most dangerous individuals are the ones we rely upon most. And sometimes the greatest act of performance is refusing to look away when something senses incorrect. If this narrative demonstrated you why palace protection matters additional than most individuals realize, make certain you're subscribed. We share these untold narratives from behind palace walls every solitary day. Drop a remark. Would you have relied upon your awareness like Staff Sergeant Wright did, or delayed for additional proof before acting? Inform us what you would have performed. We'll observe you in the subsequent one.